Hello and welcome to our Retire Early lifestyle. This video is going to shock some of you, but for those die-hard wanderlusters, you may just grin and bear it. There is usually a silver lining in those dark clouds, if you'll wait for it. Let us remind our viewers, we do not have any vested interest in keeping the truth from our viewers. We're going to show you what's happening like we always do, and then you can decide what you're going to do with the information. The Retire Abroad media and vlogger gang keeps sweeping crime under the rug as if it doesn't exist. Minimizing crime is not the way to handle this, folks. The way we've handled our 13 years of retiring, living, and sojourning abroad is that we've always wanted to know the cold, hard truth so that we may be properly prepared for it. If you know a thief is coming, you could make sure your door is locked, and if you know there's a bunch of critters trying to get into your chicken coop, you fortify the heck out of it to keep them out, right? That way you can go on to enjoy your freshly laid organic eggs every week. Can you imagine if we just pretended that those critters did not exist or that there's nothing to worry about, and then one day we wake up and all of our chickens have been killed? No more eggs. So then it's about knowing the risk and taking the bull by the horns and overcoming it, instead of just putting our heads in the sand and pretending it doesn't exist. Wouldn't you agree? We can clearly see an agenda for Americans to move abroad where they're told it's safer and to leave their awful country of the U.S. And unfortunately, there are many that are following along with this media narrative as the gospel truth. Since 2020, the narrative for Europe has been floating around that it is the next best thing since honey and everyone should move to Europe because it's so much better than the USA. And even though some people will say it is, let us not forget that Europe has been around in one form or another for thousands of years, way before the USA was even born. It's an old crusty leftover pizza from last month, forgotten in the fridge, and now it's being taken out and dusted off and revamped with some fresh sauce and new cheese on that old moldy crust. And it's not like we picked out just any old countries with high crime rates. No, not at all. We would never do that to you. Instead, we're showing you countries in Europe that are expat countries. They're so popular with Americans, it's not even funny, thanks to the heavy promotion they've been getting as of late. Just change a few laws here and there and voila! Brand new expat haven, rebranded and revamped to your liking. And that makes the conversation very relevant. So let's talk about Europe. Starting off with the United Kingdom, we think it's quite fair to compare crime rates of the US with the UK. Don't you? UK citizens have a very high level of fear, and rightly so. Knife crime has gotten out of control. Yes, you heard that right. Knife crime. So much for gun control to fight crime, eh? How is that working out? Firearms in the UK are regulated by licensing, and licensing in a form of granting a privilege, a permission, if you will, to do something which would otherwise be unlawful. Interesting thought, huh? The right to self-defense is an unalienable right. Even nature shows us that. But hey, the UK government knows best, and the unintended consequences are that knife crime is out of control. So how did knife crime in the UK become so out of control? You might want to check out that article from thenewreformer.uk. We know that the UK is not part of the EU politically, but geographically it is in Europe, and that's why we are talking about it today. So let's take a look at this. There are more people that are worried about being mugged or robbed in the United Kingdom compared to the United States. And look about worries being attacked. It's higher in the UK than the United States. And so is a problem with violent crimes such as assault and armed robbery. Now, crime in the UK shows to be just about as bad as the US, but further study reveals it's even worse than the USA. Not only that, but the US has a population 5 times bigger than the UK. This is not an unimportant little fact. The facts show that the UK has 3 times more violent crime than America. It's just not reported. What? You say not reported? Yes, unlike the USA, the British distinguish between violent crimes which do and do not result in injury. Roughly half British violent crimes result in injury. So even comparing the British with injury number with the US total of both and without injury, Britain still has more than 3 times more violent crime than America, according to discouragecriminals.net. It's a very good website, by the way. You should check it out. When you do just a little research, you find out that people in the UK do not report a lot of their crime. Crime statistics are therefore not reliable, which is something we know about some of these corrupt developing countries. They actually hide the horrible crime so as not to scare the tourists away. That's true. But the UK is a first world Western country, so what's going on? And why do they underreport their crime rates? This person said they left the UK. Having been raised in the UK and lived there for over 40 years, I can report confidently I was assaulted maybe 100 times and that 99% of the violent crimes are not reported. In fact, the police and legal system cover up all the violence. They do also. We emigrated. Wow, and just think, more and more Americans are moving to the UK for a better life? Well, that's what they're told anyway. We do think it is much easier for Americans to assimilate themselves into the culture of the UK than other European countries for various reasons, such as language and economic equivalence, but we weren't expecting crime to be that high. Underreporting of crimes in the UK is a significant issue, with studies indicating that only about 4 in 10 crimes are reported to the police. And it's due to the victim's lack of confidence in the police response and the perception that little will be done to achieve justice. That's sad. This is a travesty to the citizens of the UK and actually enables the perpetrators to continue harming people in the community. If nothing happens to the bullies, they'll keep bullying and the crime will get out of control, much like it already has. According to this BBC report, the citizens have lost faith with the police. Crimes unreported as public lose faith in the police. Victims are no longer reporting some crimes to the police because so many offenders are never brought to justice. That's what a new report has said. They have just totally lost faith in the criminal justice system. Crimes exploding in the UK, and 1 in 5 crimes in another report go unrecorded, which is about 800,000 offenses not logged as crimes. And that means they may very well have more crime than many countries on the planet. Moving on to our next crime-ridden expat country, which happens to be the most popular expat country in Europe. And that's France. Hello, France. France is a beautiful country with beautiful people and great food. We all know the superficial stuff about moving to Europe. But did you know France is becoming more and more dangerous for foreigners? Since 2020, violent crime in France has increased significantly, with around 384,100 violent crime offenses recorded in 2023, up from 353,600 in 2022. This marks a continuous rise in offenses, indicating a growing trend in violent crime over the years. Wow, who would have thought, huh? We're quite sure the French folks know why crime is going up in their country. Without making this discussion political, I have to say that France may just have more bad apples moving into town. It's like this. You're in first grade and every day you go to school with the same 20 kids. You all seem to get along just fine through first grade, second grade, third grade, and even fourth grade. And you're all growing up together, enjoying one another's playtime together. But something changes drastically in the 5th year. In the 5th grade, the school opens its doors to 20 new kids from a far-off distant land. They speak foreign, they act foreign, they look foreign, they eat foreign, and they bully all the rest of the kids in the school, and no one does a darn thing about it. Everyone becomes a bully just to survive. And a year later, the school invites 20 more foreign bullies from a distant land into the school, and all of a sudden, you're outnumbered. What do you think's going to happen? Here's a shocker. France has more crime than the USA now, according to the FBI's own crime index. France is one of the top countries American expats are moving to right now. The European countries with the most American expats include the UK, which we just talked about, Germany, and France. And did you know that one of the reasons many Americans say they're moving to Europe, particularly France and the UK, is because America has too much crime? Now that's an oxymoron if I've ever heard of one. What are we missing here? Most people don't know that the tiny country of France actually has a higher rate of violent crime than the entire United States of America. And if you don't believe the FBI's crime index, take a look at the types of crimes between France and the USA, and it will provide you with more details. I'll only read the ones that expats would be the most concerned about. You can stop the video at any time and study the charts. Worries about being mugged or robbed. It's way higher in France. Worries about getting attacked. That's way higher in France. And problem with violent crimes such as assault and armed robbery. Look at that. One has to seriously wonder what the heck is going on in some of the European countries. Expats are told low crime by the Retire Abroad media. Here is the latest from the Pied Pipers themselves. France Country Guide, everything you need to know. The pros. France is a very safe country and violent crime is very low. It's not just low, it's very low. So that means the United States crime is very low too then. Yes, that's right. In France, there is no right to bear arms. They just steal weapons, smuggle them in, or stab people with knives and other sharp objects. Just last week, there was a school stabbing that killed a student and injured 4 others. Student dead, at least 3 injured in school knife attack in France. Actually, that just happened a couple days ago. At least 4 people were treated for injuries sustained in the stabbing. Should we take away all the knives in France? No more knives or sharp objects for France. After getting away from all of the agenda narratives that picture France as the next best thing since honey, we come across this. Foreigners have been targeted in France since 2016. Honey, isn't that about the time when Retire Abroad media started promoting France was around 2016? I'm serious. But you won't see this in their promotions. Instead, they'll tell you France is safe with very low crime. Not just low crime, very low crime. Physical attacks targeting non-residents up sharply on French territory since 2016. A study by the Interior Ministry's Statistical Office shows that assaults on foreigners, mainly tourists, have doubled in 7 years. And believe me, when you're an expat living there, you're a tourist to them. While the American authorities focus on advising their nationals to keep a close watch on their property, the category of offenses actually targeting non-residents that has increased the most is physical assaults. These offenses soared by 97% in 2023, or an average of 10% more per year, a much more rapid increase than that of offenses targeting their own people. So now, let's compare big tourist city in France to big tourist city in USA. Paris, France versus Los Angeles, California crime. Make sure you're sitting down for this one. Worries being mugged or robbed. It's way higher in Paris. Worries getting attacked. It's higher in Paris. Property crimes such as vandalism and theft. Higher in France. Violent crimes such as assault and armed robbery. It's about the same. It's about the same. A little higher in Paris. But I don't think anything else needs to be said here. Crimes against foreigners and tourists are on the rise in France. And it keeps increasing while the media narrative keeps touting France as very safe. Since when do we say that LA is a safe city? Never! But Paris It's safe. Can we stop laughing now? Do you see there is an agenda? So let's move on to our last country, Sweden. Now, Sweden is a lovely country and the people are great. The food is wonderful and everything is so good. But unfortunately, Sweden is in the news again for having some of the highest crime rates in all of Europe. This story alone is what encouraged us to make this video and provide more information that is pertinent to expat life. And of course, as usual, the Rams and the legacy media have duct tape over their mouth about it. Swedish homicide rate overtakes El Salvador's. Sweden's murder rate is now 50% higher than that of El Salvador. Reports indicate the statistics reveal increasing levels of gang violence in the Scandinavian country, with 32 bombings recorded in January 2025 alone. This information is no surprise to us. El Salvador almost doesn't have any crime to speak of these days and is probably the safest country in Latin America. So it wasn't a good choice for comparison purposes. In case you weren't aware, El Salvador has cleaned up their crime epidemic by 99%. El Salvador was once notoriously one of the most crime-ridden countries in Central America, and now it barely has 10 homicides a year. A better country to compare Sweden's crime to would be Norway or Denmark or even the UK. So let's do that. You can just stop the video at any time to take a look at these charts. So crime in Sweden seems to be about 40% higher compared with its next door neighbor, Denmark. Let's compare Sweden with the UK now. This one is a bit more interesting because it's the UK, which is known for a lot of crime. We just previously talked about that. Worries about being mugged or robbed. It's just about the same as Sweden. Worries about getting attacked. Sweden's a little bit higher than the UK. Problem with violent crimes such as assault and armed robbery. It's higher than the United Kingdom. So it's about the same crime, a little bit higher in Sweden. Sweden, like much of the Scandinavian countries, are demographically changing and evolving. Norway, Denmark, Sweden, and Finland are just not the same peaceful Nordic countries they once were, but especially Sweden. We hope it doesn't really pass over into the other countries, but some of it is. Sweden seems to be getting the brunt of the crime at the moment. It is being reported that Sweden has more sexual assaults than anywhere else in Europe. That was reported in 2022. The most disturbing thing is the Sweden government says they can't control the crime. Now, could you imagine if President Bukele of El Salvador, the most violent country in Latin America, would have said that instead of doing something about it? Sweden, like France, has left their doors wide open and allowed in too many bullies and now face the devastating consequences of inaction. It seems like they really just don't care. Swedish government admits being out of control on crime. Although homicides have slightly decreased since their peak in 2022, bomb attacks have increased. In January alone, police recorded 30 bombings, most linked to gang extortion against businesses and private citizens. Sounds like mafia gangs over there. It's ironic how we think as American expats or traveling as a tourist that this gang violence won't affect us. But when there are too many bullies and the bullies are incentivized to just keep bullying people, meaning nothing happens to them, then the situation becomes out of control and it does affect the local citizens. It will affect the tourists and the expats. That's what out-of-control violence does. Gangland shootings and bombings that have plagued Sweden's biggest cities have spread to the quieter suburbs and towns, shattering its reputation as a safe and peaceful nation. Spread of gang violence wrecks Sweden's peaceful image. Sadly, this is how many of the older Swedes feel right now. More than half of Sweden's aging population no longer sees a future in their homeland. 51% of Swedes approaching retirement now say they want to move abroad. And why? Among the top reasons is to escape the migrant gang violence ravaging their cities. So, those are the top 3 expat countries with the most crime in Europe right now. However, if we were to talk about more expat countries in Europe with crime rates going up, the 2 that come to mind right now would be Spain and Turkey. Both are seeing a rise in crime. Spain especially is seeing growing crime rates since the onslaught of foreigner tourists and expats moving there. Home invasions and robberies have gone up massively since the Brits have made Spain their new home. We briefly touched on that in a previous video. We hope you enjoyed this information today. Until next video, stay safe, take care, and bye-bye.